Koa Peat plays like a tank, bulldozing his way to the rim with power and balance. That's the way that my guest today, Abdel from Taco Takes, described them. I'm joined by Abdel for the first installation of what I'm going to be calling the Above and Beyond Conversations, where we look at prospects, sort of analyze what they've done so far, what we're looking to see from them this upcoming season or draft cycle, and then also taking, a little bit more of a longer term outlook on them as well. Today, we're going to be talking about Koa Peat. This is a guy who, many people have the potential top 10 lottery pick. I've even seen him higher than that. Also, Abdel, first of all, before we get into Koa, thank you so much for joining me, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Appreciate you having me on. I'm an avid watcher of floor and ceiling, so it feels good to be on here. So yeah, Koa is an interesting prospect, so I'm excited to dive into him.
Yeah, and Abdel has been doing some great work over on Taco Takes, rapidly becoming one of my, favorite draft channels. Some NBA content there as well. And, I would really encourage everyone to check his content out. I'm going to have a link in the description as well. But, let's get right into Koa Peat. And my first question for you is going to be pretty simple, but I also think it's a little bit more complicated. How high are you on Koa Peat right now? Do you have him as a top 10 pick, a lottery pick? Where are you at with him?
Yeah, I would say because it's tough because I'm still working my way through the guys. There's a couple guys probably projected top 10, 15 that I haven't watched yet. But what I would say is he's in the running. I think by the end of my process when the season starts, he'll probably be in the running for top 10, fringe top 10. And like my process going through him, I was surprised what type of prospect he came out to be versus what I expected, which we can kind of get into. But I would say, yeah, probably fringe top 10 by the end of by preseason. So.
Yeah, I think I'm going to end up, similar to you. I'm still working my way through my board, hoping to have that up soon, but probably around that, end of the lottery range for me. I'm very interested in getting into his game as well and kind of digging into what you just said. Because I
Yeah.
think when I look at Koa's game and, whenever I've watched him, not just this past season, but really across any context, it's always his strength that has stood out the most for me. And I know that you've mentioned this as well. So,
Yeah.
how do you see this playing out? Because, in my opinion, and I think that you might agree with me on this, strength is just one of the most important things in the NBA right now.
Yeah, for sure. Like that's kind of the moment you watch Pete play, the initial thing that stands out immediately is how strong he is. And not only how strong, but how physical he is too, right? So yeah, when I started watching him, I didn't know what to expect. I knew he had good size. But at his kind of measurements, I wasn't sure if he was going to be like a more of a wing perimeter player or forward / big, right? And he definitely is more of a big to me, which kind of shapes the way I view the rest of his game. But yeah, like he is extremely physical, strong, and he was also an early developer physically as well. So this can also be a double-edged sword, right? Because we're praising his strength, but there's also some skepticism on, he's just been bullying guys early. When the rest of his age group catches up with him or he gets to the NBA, like how is that going to look, right? And that's one of my questions for him as well, is if his physical style of scoring will translate not only NCAA but also NBA, right? Depending how he answers that question, then the rest of his tools surrounding that kind of have to support or come into play, to kind of buoy his potential as a prospect, right? So that was kind of my first initial thing watching him is, while he's very physical, strong, gets to the line, but outside that, I started to ask the question, okay, what else is there offensively, creation-wise, right? So that was kind of my initial for his scoring impact, viewpoint. I'm not sure if you felt the same way, but yeah, that's kind of how it landed, just for his offensive creation.
Yeah, no, I felt similarly to you. I remember the very first time that I watched Koa play, and yeah, it's immediately the strength that stands out to me. I think it's the physicality, like you touched on, right? Like,
Yeah.
so many people in the NBA, I think, will not only talk about playing through contact, but playing with contact. So, initiating that physicality, trying to get to the line, trying to create contact in whichever ways possible in order to create further advantages, for yourself and your team. I think Koa does this basically throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
His offensive motor is something that I like. He really repeats efforts, right? Like he's 6'8", 235, and he comes from a football family, which I think is important to mention just because
Hmm.
how physical he plays. I think that he gets pretty low to the floor. I sometimes wish that he could get a little lower, actually,
Yeah.
but he does do a good job at, kind of, I guess, tugging the ball under his arm, getting into the paint, playing through
Yeah.
contact. So I definitely agree with you there. And I also think that it's impressive the way that he does this because, as you mentioned yourself in your video, Koa is a good athlete, but he's not particularly
Yeah.
quick. He's not particularly bouncy. He can get up for a dunk, but it's not like,
Yeah.
he's Zion or Blake Griffin.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that's kind of the key to this because if he was that type of athlete, then I would have less questions about his scoring game translating, right? But the fact that he's like a good athlete who's very strong but not outwardly elite in any particular area outside like his strength, I guess. But that's kind of like brings me back. Okay, like if he can, because there's multiple clips, especially like in the video. I think it was like they're facing Columbus. He was just getting cut off like every time he drove, and it was like, and that also goes into his handle as well. It's pretty rudimentary. So like once he gets cut off, there's not really a quick move or reaction that he can do to go the other way and continue his momentum. It's kind of like a reset. Okay, let me go reset. It's kind of like he's trying to bash down the doors of the castle or something. Right? There's not much penetration, right? So that kind of made me question. He's like, oh, okay. So I think I came out less higher on his scoring. The thing I'll say is he's been getting better at like his mid-range face-up pull-up game. So that could be a way he kind of helps, especially if he can't get to the paint always. Oh, I have this thing to rely on. So that could be a way he kind of keeps himself afloat. But the more and more I watched him, I'm like, oh, my focus shift from his offensive creation to how I think he has a pretty high potential defensively. And I was pretty impressed from what I've seen. And especially if everything goes into place, the type of profile he is defensively, as a four who can protect the rim, provide some secondary rim protection, and survive out on the perimeter. That's like really what teams are looking for, right? So he kind of reminds me of that kind of bracket of like Jared Vanderbilt, Hollis Jefferson, and on the higher end, Aaron Gordon, like that type of bracket where it's like a do everything for who can't really shoot. Gordon's like can shoot now; he's actually good, but like those other guys. So that's the picture I started to get in my head. I was like, oh, okay, he's a kind of different type of prospect than I expecting. I thought he was going to be like a scorer type, but I'm more higher on his defense. So that's kind of where I started to land.
Yeah, you touched on a bunch of things here that I consider crucial, and I think we're all going to be watching, to see this at Arizona now. And let me just start off, with his ball handling, because you hit the nail on the head there. Like, Koa can get to his spots if he's relying on his strength and, sort of just putting his head down sometimes and bullying his way, to say it, all the way into the paint. But if he is met, with either some nail help or if the defender just does a good job at moving his feet and staying in front, then he definitely doesn't have that much wiggle with the ball in his hands. He doesn't have that many counters either. So absolutely, his handle is going to be pretty pivotal, I would say, to his development as a scorer. The face-up game as well, I'll say it's improved, which I like that you point out, because I remember when I first started watching Koa, it really felt as though he was almost strictly one-dimensional, just almost, entirely based on driving or posting up. But now his perimeter game or just his outside game has evolved a little bit, which I like. I almost think that it's more important for him to flesh out this ball handling and this face up or, mid-range in between game than it is to flesh out any potential 3-point scoring. Let
Yeah.
me just, read you some stats here, and then I'll get your thoughts on them. But you mentioned this as well in your video. Koa can score at the rim pretty often, but his touch is a little bit iffy in some ways. He's not great at the rim. You look at, his free throw numbers as well. I have 92 games here tracked all the way back to 2021. From the free throw line, he shot about 64% on
Yeah.
481 attempts. If we, flesh that out to the perimeter from three, he's at 21.5% from deep, making 31 of his 144 attempted threes. So even though I did just say that his 3-point shooting isn't particularly important, the reason why I bring up that stat is more so about his touch. Because if he doesn't have, that soft touch when he does get to the rim or when he is getting to those areas, either around the free throw line or the elbows or the baseline on his face ups, then I do worry that his scoring might always be a little bit limited. And kind of going back to what you said as well, if his skill set is always more of a five, but his body is more like a three or a four, then we're going to get into, the strengths that brings defensively in just a short bit. But I do worry about the outcome on the other end.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely the touch concerns are very real and they stood out to me as well. Even on his pull-up twos, there wasn't any really as far as like the things I could see on Synergy, a season where he was like outstanding, right? And even all his dribble twos were, I think they were around like 30-ish%. They didn't really come out to like the mid to high 40s or what you're looking to see, like, oh, this is actually a tool. It was more of like, oh, he's flashing it, but it wasn't consistent at all, right? So, and then obviously the 3-point shooting, like his mechanics are a bit, there's a lot to work on because like he shoots very, like he doesn't have much horizontal sway to it. It's like up, and then his like rhythm on it like is very like iffy at times, and he'll have shots that just hit the backboard fully, right? So it's it I would say like there's certain prospects where you keep the in the back of your mind, oh, if he shoots, and there's certain prospects where you forget about that. You don't even like, you're like, okay, whatever, let's just worry about the rest of the stuff. That's why I put Koa. So yeah, like the mid-range, intermediate touch development, very important. Handle, like you mentioned earlier. But yeah, like if he's able to play the five in spurts at the next level, then you see a bit more utility to him because then offensively it makes a bit more sense. But yeah, even the world where he develops as a spot up 3-point shooter, right? It's never going to be on enough volume to. I think people are starting to catch on. Like that type of stuff is fake. Like guys who are shooting like 3 attempts a game, but they're shooting 36%. Teams don't care, right? So at the end of the day, it's more about, I think, for his off-ball game, which kind of gets to another area. Early in like the 2022-ish EYBL, when I was watching him when he was a lot younger, he was playing like almost strictly off-ball, cutting a lot, offensive rebounding, right? Because he wasn't as established on his EYBL team. That type, like his cutting instinct showed on tape. So I think that could be an avenue where even if he's playing the 4, like teams are smart enough now, especially offensive coaches, they can have a non-shooting 4 as long as he's a very instinctual and willing cutter to kind of help with the spacing, right? So I think that's where his focus should be rather than on spot up shooting development. If it happens, nice, but it's not going to change much in the equation, right? We're talking about of like gumming up the spacing. So that's kind of what I think about his offensive game outside his creation.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, yeah, that's spot on. I think that if he develops into any, semblance of a spot up shooter, that's great. But I don't really, consider that or weigh that in too much right now in my evaluation of it. The cutting is interesting because I do like him as a cutter as well. I'm interested in seeing what he can do as a roller as well, particularly on the
Yes.
short roll. I think that he's not an awesome playmaker, but he can
Yeah.
make enough basic reads to the point where he's not some sort of black hole on offense or anything like that. Yeah, I'd really like to see him as a four that can, roll into space, make those plays around the free throw line. He can play with a stretch big as well, which even though I think there aren't that many real stretch bigs, I should say,
Yeah.
that is sort of an archetype that you always keep in mind, at least ideally, if it happens, that's who you would fit Koa next to. Um, I,
Yeah.
I'm interested as well, you know, in this versatility that he has as a passer and as a defender. How high are you in both of these areas for Koa?
So defense much higher than passing. Um, yeah, like one of the things that stood out immediately is how quickly it gets off the floor. Like there were a bunch of plays where he kind of rotated over and immediately got off the floor very quicker than I expected. Like I stood out on tape to get the block. Um, he looks pretty long on film, so I think he might have about 7 foot wingspan, but nothing's confirmed yet. But yeah, on defense, he's kind of fits in that mold of like can switch out onto guards if needed, but mostly a roamer and can play the low man as well on defense. And those are like two very, very important roles, especially today's NBA, right? Where defenses are always in rotation, right? You need guys who can clean up mistakes, recover, right? So he fits that role to a T. So I'm higher on his defense is the sell for me as a prospect, essentially. Passing, he got better, and there was flashes. Like I said in the video early on, like I think his overall assist to turnover thing was about below 1. I think it was like 0.7 or something. But there was in his early career, like before 2023, it was like really low because I think he had one season where he was turning the ball over like crazy, and then after that it climbed above 1. I think it was like 1.1, 1.2 or something. So I started to see on the film him improve as a playmaker, but it's nothing really special. It's mostly like he's making the right pass on the right timing, which is mostly what you need for what you described: short roll as a roll man, or grabbing the ball on cuts, right, or attacking like in motion, right? So I think his passing could become solid, which I think that's good enough. And then I think his defense could potentially be like not elite high level, but like just one tier below. That he's like, one of the better defenders at his position in the league, but might not be an all defense candidate. But at his position size, that's extremely valuable, right? So I would say defense first, then passing is okay. That's what I would say.
As we look towards, the next chapter now of, his life as a prospect, really, what are you looking to see from Koa? And I'm not just referring to in college because, college can often be tricky, especially he's on a pretty loaded team. So I don't think
Yeah.
that would be one of those situations where he can just go out on the floor and do whatever, which, is great. I appreciate that even more than those situations where a prospect has, complete liberty to do whatever they want. But I do want to, kind of get into about what you think that his role at the next level might look like, because
Mhm.
some of these limitations that we got into and some of these strengths as well, I think they'll pop up a little bit differently, right? Like his scoring, I think, is going to have to evolve. His drives, even if he is mostly, getting to the rim and scoring there, the pickup point on his drives probably is going to have to start more so on the perimeter than right inside the perimeter. He's going to have to play a little bit more, I think, not as post up centric, which I think he's gotten better at. But earlier in his career, he could, sort of revert to that, just sort of play some bully ball style basketball. Yeah, what do you want to see from him? And are you thinking that his draft stock at Arizona, if I'm making sense, is going to get higher? Because there are some guys that you sort of evaluate in preseason, and of course, they can sort of move around your board a little bit from 10 to 15, or maybe like shift down a tier, but you're always pretty confident in their
Yeah.
outcome. Do you think that the broad strokes of who he is as a prospect is going to change?
Yeah, I think at Arizona, I think his range is a bit more wider than some of the other guys, like you described, because I could see situations. It's kind of two ways. I could see situations where he's not as featured offensively, um, and people might get more down on him, but I think that could also help him. Like I could see a situation where he's like, oh, his Bartovic numbers are like crazy efficient, like in December, right? And then people start, whispering like, oh, what about Koa Peat guys, right? Um, I think if he pairs really good efficiency with good defensive numbers, especially like defensive playmaking numbers, like stock percentage, those are the two things I could see people like keeping him top 10 lottery. If his efficiency drops, right, then I could see a big slide, like mid to late first, type of slide. That's kind of what I think about him. So he's a bit more volatile than the other guys in his neighborhood. So that's what I think. In terms of like his projected role, like I said, I think his like path to success could be a really efficient, defensively focused four, right? That could sprinkle in, if his handle gets a bit better and he focuses on the mid range, some possessions where he can take the ball and do something himself, right? Then all of a sudden, like the scoring and stuff like that is a bit more of just like a sprinkle on the top of like a really good defensive four who could just finish plays, right? That's the realm I see him being in. But yeah, I would say he's like his standard deviation is a lot wider than the other guys going into this season at Arizona.
Abdel, thank you so much for joining me today on the first installment ever of the Above and Beyond Conversations. Guys, like I mentioned at the top of this video, Abdel is putting out some great content now on a weekly basis over on the Taco Takes channel. The link is going to be in the description of this bio. Abdel, is there anything else that you'd like to plug?
Yeah, like you mentioned, I'm gonna try to keep up the weekly videos. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com Abdel_taco. So follow me there. YouTube channel, like Wilco mentioned, and yeah, that should be it. Appreciate you having me on, man, for sure.